A grand, dimly lit study lined with towering bookshelves. A warm fire crackles in the hearth. The air smells of old parchment, pipe smoke, and deep contemplation. 3 men sit in high-backed leather chairs, G.K. Chesterton, beaming with his usual mirth, C.S. Lewis, leaning forward with his hands clasped in deep thought, and J.R.R. Tolkien, the moderator, pipe in hand, prepared to steer the discussion.
Tolkien, we are gathered here not merely to argue but to uncover truth. Jack C.S. Lewis, you have long insisted that Christianity is a myth, no different from Norse legends or Greek epics, comforting but not reality. Gilbert Chesterton, you have argued that atheism is not merely false but an irrational leap of faith greater than belief in God itself. Tonight, we shall see whose worldview truly holds.
Lewis, I will be direct, as I always am. I was raised in the faith, but as I matured, reason led me away from it. The universe, as I see it, is indifferent to us. There is no grand design, no divine storyteller, just cold, indifferent matter moving endlessly through time. Christianity is a lovely tale, but so were the myths of Odin and Zeus. Why should I grant it special status? You speak of morality as if it were divine, but in truth, it is an evolved trait for survival. Altruism, sacrifice, even love, these are merely evolutionary adaptations. Why assign them to God? And suffering, let us not forget suffering. If God exists, he must either be powerless or cruel, for the world is filled with horrors. Famine, disease, war, the cries of a child who will never be comforted, these are not the marks of a benevolent creator. Lewis leans back, his gaze sharp. Christianity is an emotional crutch. It comforts, yes, but it does not explain.
Chesterton, with his usual mirth, exhales a cloud of pipe smoke and smiles. Ah, Jack, you argue against Christianity as a man who cannot see the forest because he has fixated on one withered tree. You believe Christianity is a myth. Good. It is. But it is the one myth that happens to be true. You argue that morality is just an evolutionary quirk. But if morality is merely survival instinct, why then do men die for the weak? Why does a soldier leap upon a grenade to save others? Why does the mother go hungry to feed her child? These actions defy the evolutionary instinct to preserve oneself. If survival was our only goal, we would be selfish creatures, not sacrificial ones. As for suffering, you assume that hardship disproves God. But let me turn the question on its head. If there is no God, what right have you to call anything evil? If the universe is indifferent, then suffering is just a meaningless occurrence, no different from a stone rolling down a hill. But your heart rebels at this. You know suffering is real not just as an event but as an injustice. But to call it injustice, you must assume there is a justice to compare it to. And where does this justice come from? Chesterton leans forward, his eyes twinkling. Jack, the real problem with atheism is that it is too small for the human soul. It does not explain joy, love, poetry, or beauty. It does not explain why we tell stories of heroes who sacrifice themselves for others. It does not explain why we all, at the core of our being, long for something beyond this world.
Lewis, Gilbert, you say that Christianity is a myth. That is true, but how do you prove it? All religions claim truth. How is this story different? Chesterton chuckles. Because it is the one myth where God himself writes himself into the story. In all pagan myths, the gods remain on Olympus, separate from man. In Christianity, the Creator does the unthinkable. He steps into his own creation. He walks among us, he suffers among us, and he redeems us through his own sacrifice. This is not the myth man wanted, it is the myth man needed. You argue that Christianity is only a comfort. But have you considered how inconvenient it is? No other religion tells men to love their enemies. No other faith insists on humility, sacrifice, and forgiveness over power. If men invented a religion, they would not invent one that requires so much of them. Lewis pauses, considering this.
History tells us that this was the very struggle Lewis faced. He once admitted that he was the most reluctant convert in all of England, dragged into belief, not by blind faith, but by overwhelming reason. It was Chesterton's The Everlasting Man that first shook him. It was Tolkien's friendship that carried him forward. And so, in time, C.S. Lewis became one of Christianity's greatest defenders. The man who once rejected myth came to see that Christianity was the true myth, one written by the author of all things. And perhaps, like Lewis, we too must ask, if life is a story, who is the author?